In the daily life of the Inuit, the snow goggles were not worn casually. They were treated with care and attention because the risks they guarded against were real and immediate. Snow blindness could set in quickly and could last for days, leaving a hunter vulnerable, unable to provide for his family, and even at risk of death if caught without help in the vast, icy wilderness. So putting on the goggles was an act of preparation, of respect for the environment, and a signal that one was ready to meet the Arctic on its own terms. The slits themselves, though tiny, were perfectly aligned to maximize vision while minimizing light exposure. Some variations of the goggles had slightly angled slits, tilting upwards or sideways depending on the typical position of the sun in a given region. The Inuit observed the patterns of sunlight, the way it reflected off the snow, and adjusted their designs accordingly. It was a constant dialogue between the environment and the people who lived within it, a dynamic, living tradition of innovation. Even the straps used to secure the goggles were carefully thought out. They were often made from caribou, sinew, or sealskin, materials that could endure the cold without becoming brittle. A loose strap could mean a gap where sunlight might sneak in. A strap tight could cause discomfort and distraction during long hunting trips. Finding the right balance was yet another detail that showed how much thought and care went into the design and use of snow goggles. Different families sometimes had slight variations in how they made their goggles. Some preferred a thicker frame for extra insulation around the eyes. Others opted for thinner, lighter frames to reduce weight during long journeys. Some even incorporated decorative elements, tiny carvings or patterns, etched into the surface. These decorations were not just for beauty. They were often symbols of family lineage, personal achievements, or spiritual beliefs, tying the wearer's identity to their equipment. The goggles were not worn all the time, of course. In overcast weather, or in the low light of the long Arctic winter, they might be tucked away. But once the spring came, when the sun climbed higher in the sky and the snow's surface began to glare like a mirror, the goggles became as essential as boots or mittens. Without them, even the most experienced refiner could himself helpless, blinded by the dazzling light of his own world. Travel across the ice demanded constant vigilance. Crevices, pressure ridges, and sudden snow squalls were daily threats. The goggles, while limiting peripheral vision, sharpened forward focus, encouraging the wearer to scan carefully and move deliberately. It wasn't about rushing across the landscape. It was about reading the subtle signs in the snow, sensing changes in the wind, recognizing the sparkle of fresh ice or the dullness of a hidden gap. Because the Inuit traveled primarily by dog sled or on foot, often covering long distances to hunt seals, caribou, or fish, they needed every advantage to stay safe and efficient. The snow goggles allowed them to maintain their routines, to keep moving, and to sustain their way of life even during the most punishing parts of the year. In this way, the goggles weren't just protective gear. They were enablers of movement, of life, of survival itself. Storytelling was another way that knowledge about snow blindness and the importance of goggles was passed down. Elders would recount tales of hunters who lost their sight to the sun, sometimes with tragic consequences. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were lessons, warnings wrapped in narrative, meant to stay in the memory longer than a simple instruction might. In the oral traditions of the Inuit, every story had a purpose, and many of them carried practical advice for surviving the extremes. Inuit spirituality also had ties to vision and sight. Some believed that blindness was a form of spiritual imbalance, a disconnection between the person and the forces of nature. Protecting the eyes, then, wasn't just a physical act, it was a spiritual responsibility, maintaining harmony with the world around them. The goggles, simple as they appeared, were a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, safeguarding both the body and the soul. As the seasons shifted and the days grew longer, the need for snow goggles increased dramatically. In the far north, the sun doesn't just rise and set in a normal pattern. There are months where the sun barely dips below the horizon, casting a permanent, low, blinding light over the ice. During these periods, the snow goggles became a near constant companion. Hunters would wake, eat, travel, work, and rest, all while wearing the narrow-eyed protection that allowed them to endure the relentless light. Even resting without goggles could be risky during the brightest days. A short nap on the open ice without eye protection could result in painful burning of the cornea, leading to days of impaired vision or worse. That's why Inuit families often had multiple pairs of goggles, one for each member, custom fitted and maintained. Children were taught early the importance of their goggles, learning to respect them as much as any other critical tool. Repairing broken goggles was a vital skill. A crack in the frame or a frayed strap couldn't simply be ignored. Hunters carried repair kits with them, small needles and sinew threads, bits of wood or bone that could be fashioned into quick fixes. The cold and the constant movement made wear and tear inevitable, but an Inuit hunter prepared for these contingencies, ready to patch or even carve a new set of goggles if necessary, using the resources at hand. Sometimes, hunters would even improvise temporary goggles from bits of bark or hide if caught without proper gear. They understood that protecting their eyes was not optional. It was as crucial as shelter, fire, or food. No matter how well a hunter knew the land, he would be helpless without his sight. The land itself taught this lesson again and again. The Arctic does not forgive complacency. It demands respect, preparation, and humility. The Inuit, through thousands of years of lived experience, built their culture around these truths. Snow goggles are just one symbol of this deeper wisdom, a tool forged not out of conquest, but out of coexistence. Today, as we face new frontiers, whether in technology, climate, or space exploration, the spirit behind the snow goggles remains a beacon. They remind us that in any extreme environment, survival depends not on overwhelming force, but on observation, adaptability, and a profound respect for the conditions we are in. The Inuit snow goggles are more than a piece of history. They are a living example of how humanity's greatest strength is not in its ability to dominate nature, but in its ability to listen to it, learn from it, and work within it. In the shimmering white of the Arctic, through narrow slits in bone and wood, the Inuit found a way to see clearly, to walk confidently, and to thrive. And their story, the story carved into every pair of snow goggles, continues to inspire all of us to this day. The Inuit way of life teaches us that survival isn't about fighting against nature. It's about working with it, learning from it, and finding ways to live in harmony with it. The snow goggles were not a way to block out the Arctic. They were a way to see it more clearly,